Welcome to Heartfelt Revenge Stories. My name is Jordan Rivers. The backyard in Denver buzzed with birthday music, string lights draped across the wooden fence, and the smoky scent of barbecued ribs floating through the warm evening air. Mom, Patricia, stood tall on the patio steps, her wine glass catching the light as her voice cut through the noise like a blade. "Some children," she said, her eyes locked on my brother Mason, "make you proud every single day." She paused, letting the words hang heavy. "Others, well, others you just wish would disappear." Laughter rippled through the crowd. Mason's grin stretched wide. Dad stayed silent, same as always. I raised my own glass, my hand steady even as my heart pounded. I smiled right back at her. "Well, Mom, good news. Your wish just came true. I'm gone, living in Portland now." The music kept playing, but everything else stopped. Mom's smile cracked and froze on her face. Mason coughed into his beer, choking slightly. I set my glass down on the patio table, walked through the sliding door into the house, and didn't look back. That was the last family gathering I ever attended. If your parent ever said something that cut so deep you felt it in your bones, maybe exactly the way they meant it to, drop it in the comments. Please subscribe and like this video, and listen to my story till the end, and let me know which city you're listening from. That way I can see how far my story has traveled. I grew up in a brick house on the outskirts of Denver, the kind with a driveway split by weeds pushing through cracks, and a garage that always smelled like motor oil and old tennis rackets. Mom ran that house like a scoreboard at a championship game. Every single point went to Mason. He was the star quarterback for the high school team, the one who got brand new cleats before tryouts even started, the one whose games dominated every conversation at the dinner table. My 8th birthday fell on a Wednesday. I walked home from school with my backpack bouncing against my shoulders, expecting something, anything. Maybe a grocery store cake, the cheap kind with plastic decorations on top. The kitchen counter was empty except for a note scribbled on the back of an envelope. "Mason has practice. Order pizza if you're hungry." I stood there for a long moment, then ate cereal straight from the box, milk dripping onto the linoleum floor. Dad came home later, his tie already loosened, and ruffled my hair without saying a single word. That was his version of sorry, I guess. Mason's birthdays were completely different. The entire neighborhood showed up. Mom rented a bounce house one year, hired someone to grill steaks and burgers the next. She'd stand at the front gate in her sundress, waving people in, telling everyone about how Mason threw 3 touchdowns in the homecoming game. I'd sit on the porch steps, counting cars driving by, wondering if anyone even noticed I existed. Mom never tried to hide it. "Mason is going places," she'd say, while folding his jerseys, the fabric soft from being washed so many times. "You need to support him, Jordan." Support meant giving up my Saturday mornings to sit in those hard bleachers at his games. It meant handing over my allowance when his fundraiser jar came up short. I did it all without complaining, because complaining got you absolutely nowhere in that house. Dad, Harold, worked downtown, numbers and spreadsheets all day long. He'd come home exhausted, kick off his shoes by the front door, and disappear into the den with the TV remote. If Mom raised her voice about Mason needing new equipment, he'd nod slowly and sign the check without question. If I asked for $20 for a school field trip, he'd glance up just long enough to say, "Ask your mother." That was the end of it, every single time. The only person who really saw me was Aunt Rachel, Dad's younger sister. She lived across town in a tiny apartment above a coffee shop, the kind where the smell of fresh pastries leaked through the floorboards every morning. She started showing up on random Sundays, pulling into our driveway in her beat-up Toyota, her trunk mysteriously full of groceries she claimed she didn't need. Mom would frown when she saw Rachel's car, but would let her in anyway. Rachel waited until Mom was in the shower or out running errands. Then she slipped an envelope into my backpack, $50, sometimes $100, folded tight with a rubber band around it. "For books," she'd whisper, tapping the side of her nose like we were sharing the world's biggest secret, "or whatever you need, sweetheart." I used the first envelope to buy a membership at the community center library, the kind that let me check out programming books without worrying about late fees. One afternoon, when Mason had a tournament 2 hours away in Boulder, the house emptied completely. Mom was packing coolers, Dad was loading equipment into the trunk. I stayed behind, claiming I had a stomachache that wouldn't quit. As soon as their minivan disappeared down the street, Aunt Rachel knocked on the back door. She didn't ask me any questions. She just pressed a transit pass into my hand and said, "There's a coding club at the tech hub downtown. It meets every Thursday evening. You should go, Jordan." So I went. The room smelled like burnt coffee and dry erase markers that had seen better days. Kids around my age hunched over laptops, their fingers flying across keyboards like pianists. The instructor, a guy with a long ponytail and a faded NASA shirt that had probably been through 100 washes, showed me how to write my first line of code. It printed "Hello Jordan" on the screen, and something inside me shifted. It felt like a door I didn't even know existed had finally swung open, and light was pouring through. Have you ever found something that made you feel like yourself for the first time? Like you'd been waiting your whole life to discover it? Let me know in the comments. Mom found out months later. I'd left a printout on the kitchen table by accident, some assignment about loops and variables that I'd been working on late into the night. She picked it up between two fingers, like it might contaminate her somehow. "This is what you're wasting time on?" she asked, her voice sharp as broken glass. "Mason needs new catcher's gear. The old stuff is falling apart." She crumpled the paper with one quick motion and tossed it straight into the trash can. I waited until she went to bed that night. Then I fished the paper out from under coffee grounds and banana peels, smoothed out every wrinkle as carefully as I could, and taped it inside my math notebook where she'd never look. Dad saw the whole thing happen. He was pouring his morning coffee, steam rising between us like a wall. Our eyes met for just half a second. He looked away first, grabbed his mug, and closed the den door without a word. That was Harold, always choosing the path with the least amount of noise. Aunt Rachel kept the envelopes coming, week after week, month after month. She never asked for thank yous or explanations. Once, she drove me to this electronic surplus store on the edge of town, the one with bins overflowing with dusty circuit boards and tangled cables that looked like they'd been there since the 90s. I spent $40 on a broken laptop someone had abandoned. She waited in the car with the engine running low and steady. When I came out clutching that laptop like it was made of gold, she just smiled and said, "Build something amazing, Jordan." And I did. Down in the basement storage room, really just a closet with a bare light bulb and a folding table I'd dragged down from the garage, I took that laptop apart screw by screw. The screen was cracked beyond repair, the battery was completely dead, but the motherboard lit up when I connected it to an old power supply I'd found at a yard sale. That was the very first machine I ever fixed with my own hands. I didn't give it a name. Names felt like promises I wasn't sure I could keep. Mason made varsity his junior year. The local newspaper ran a huge photo of him on the field, arm cocked back mid-throw, Mom beaming in the background like she'd won the lottery. They framed it and hung it in the hallway, right above the spot where my kindergarten finger painting used to be. I walked past that photo every single morning on my way to catch the bus, backpack heavy with library books, and Rachel's latest envelope tucked safely inside. Mom threw a massive party when Mason signed with the college scout. Streamers everywhere, balloons in every corner, a sheet cake that said "Future Pro" in bright blue icing. I ate a corner piece alone in the kitchen while the living room exploded with laughter and cheers. Aunt Rachel found me there, leaning quietly against the counter, and slipped another envelope into my hoodie pocket. "Keep going, Jordan," she said softly, her voice steady and sure, like she already knew exactly how this story would end. But everything was about to change, because that cramped little storage room was about to become something nobody in my family could have ever predicted. Stay with me. The storage room tucked under the basement stairs became my sanctuary, my escape, my entire world. It was a narrow space crammed with holiday decoration boxes and Dad's forgotten golf clubs collecting dust. I dragged in a card table from the garage, set up a gooseneck lamp I'd bought at a yard sale for $2, and claimed that corner as completely mine. The bulb buzzed constantly, this faint electrical hum that filled the silence, casting long shadows across concrete walls that smelled like damp cardboard and summers that had been forgotten years ago. I started with library books, thick, heavy ones about C++ and Python, pages dog-eared from too many hands flipping through them before mine. The downtown library branch had a quiet section in the very back where the air conditioning hummed loud enough to drown out the rest of the world. I'd check out 3 books at a time, stuff them deep in my backpack, and bike home as fast as I could before Mom noticed I was gone. Reading code felt like cracking open a secret language, each line a puzzle that only made sense if you stared at it long enough, turned it over in your mind, let it settle. The first laptop came from Aunt Rachel's envelope money. I bought it off someone on Craigslist who met me in a parking lot behind a gas station that smelled like diesel and old coffee. The screen flickered constantly. The keyboard was missing the letter J completely, but it booted to a command prompt, and that was all I needed. I carried it down those basement stairs like I was smuggling contraband, set it carefully on the table, and spent entire nights prying open the case with a butter knife from the kitchen drawer. Dust coated my fingers as I cleaned out the fan, replaced a battery that had swollen up like a balloon with one I'd scavenged from a dead TV remote. When it finally hummed to life without immediately crashing, I sat back in that folding chair and just stared at the glowing cursor on the screen, my heart pounding harder than it ever had during any of Mason's championship games upstairs. Mom discovered my setup one Saturday morning. She'd come downstairs hunting for Christmas ornaments, flipped on the overhead light, and froze completely in the doorway, like she'd stumbled onto a crime scene. "What is all this junk?" she snapped, her voice echoing off the concrete. She kicked a loose power cord across the floor. Extension cables snaked everywhere, all connected to a surge protector I'd secretly plugged into the outlet behind the dryer. She picked up a circuit board I'd pulled from an old printer. "This is trash, Jordan, complete trash. Mason needs the basement for his new weight bench." I didn't argue with her. There was no point. I just unplugged everything slowly, coiled up all the cables, and waited silently until she stomped back upstairs, her footsteps heavy with irritation. Then I moved the entire table deeper into the corner, behind a stack of old paint cans where the light barely reached at all. The next day, during lunch period, I ran to the hardware store and bought a longer Ethernet cable using my cafeteria money. I drilled the tiniest hole I could through the floor joist and fed the cable up to the living room router when absolutely nobody was home. Dial-up was dead and gone. This cable was my lifeline to everything. Ever had to hide something you loved just to keep it safe? Something that mattered more than anything else? Tell me about it. School computers were completely locked down with restrictions, but the public library had terminals with internet access. I'd log in after school hours, download tutorials about server setup, and burn them onto CDs using the computer lab's ancient burner that sounded like it might explode any second. Back in my storage room, I installed Linux on the laptop, Ubuntu, because the forums all said it was free and forgiving for beginners. Error messages flashed angry red across the screen, but I learned to read them like warning labels on dangerous chemicals. Reboot, tweak the code, repeat the process, over and over again. One winter break, Mason was away at some elite football camp down in Arizona. The house stayed quiet for an entire glorious week. I used every second of that time to scavenge more parts from anywhere I could find them. A neighbor had tossed an old desktop tower out during bulk trash pickup. I hauled it home under cover of darkness, the wheels on my skateboard squeaking loud against the sidewalk. Inside that tower were 2 hard drives, a dusty motherboard that looked ancient, and a power supply that sparked dangerously when I first tested it. I carefully stripped out what worked, soldered jumper wires together using an iron I'd borrowed from shop class, and somehow built a second machine that actually functioned. It ran scorching hot, fans whining constantly like summer cicadas, but it stayed online. I connected both computers with a crossover cable and set up a tiny local network in that cramped corner. The library books called it a cluster, nothing fancy or professional, just barely enough to run the simulations I'd been coding for fun late into the night.
One program predicted rain chances based on data from a cheap weather sensor I'd stuck to the basement window with duct tape. Another sorted through Mason's batting statistics from newspaper clippings I'd scanned at the downtown coffee shop. Completely useless to anyone else in the world, but it proved my setup actually worked. Mom caught me again during spring cleaning season. She yanked open the storage room door with both arms full of garbage bags, ready to wage war on clutter. "You're turning my entire house into a junkyard, Jordan," she said, staring hard at the tower of fans and tangled wires. She grabbed a box of old floppy disks and shook it at me.
This is exactly why you'll never amount to anything worthwhile. Mason is out there training with professionals, real coaches, and you're down here playing with literal garbage. I waited in complete silence until she finally left, slamming the door behind her. Then I rebuilt everything exactly the way it had been before, screw by screw, wire by wire. The words, "you'll never amount to anything," echoed in my head for days, but I shoved them down deep. That same night, I ordered a third hard drive online using Rachel's latest envelope and configured something called RAID for redundancy. The machines talked to each other now, sharing processing load, backing up data automatically. I didn't name the network anything special. Labels just invited too many questions I didn't want to answer. By sophomore year, the storage room had developed its own rhythm, its own heartbeat. I'd slip downstairs right after dinner every single night, headphones blocking out the TV noise from upstairs, and code until the bulb flickered and threatened to die. Online forums became my real classmates. Users with handles like Kernel Panic and Bite Me answered my desperate questions at 2 in the morning when I was stuck on impossible bugs. I contributed my own fixes when I could, earned reputation points, learned how to debug crashes that froze entire systems. The community felt more like family than anyone upstairs ever had. The first real server took shape from 4 discarded desktop towers I'd collected over months. I lined them up carefully on a metal shelf I'd bolted directly into the concrete wall, connected everything with network switches I'd bought cheap at a weekend flea market. Cooling came from box fans I'd zip-tied to the metal frame. The whole thing hummed constantly, this low mechanical growl that vibrated softly through the floor. I hosted a simple website on it, nothing public-facing, just a page that displayed uptime statistics. Seeing that beautiful 99.9% number after running for a full month felt better than any report card I'd ever brought home. Mom never came down to that storage room again. She'd mutter complaints about the electric bill climbing higher, but Dad just paid it every month without a single comment or question. The machines kept growing, one salvaged piece at a time, until that dark corner looked like a miniature data center pulled straight from a tech company. I knew every fan curve by heart, every loose screw, every potential failure point. It wasn't beautiful or professional, but it was entirely, completely mine. Then one fall afternoon, an envelope arrived that would change absolutely everything. An envelope I never thought I'd see. Keep listening. An envelope from Portland State University landed on our kitchen counter one crisp fall afternoon. Thick, cream-colored paper with the university seal and Boston gold that caught the light. I found it half buried under a mountain of Mason's recruiting letters and Mom's coupon circulars she never actually used. My name was typed in bold letters across the front, official and real and impossible to ignore. I slid a butter knife carefully under the flap, my heart absolutely racing as I pulled out the acceptance packet. Full ride scholarship, every single penny covered. Tuition, room, board, even a stipend for textbooks and supplies. Computer science program, top ranked in the entire region. I read it 3 times just to make sure I wasn't imagining things, that the words wouldn't disappear if I blinked. I waited until dinner to say anything. The table was set with meatloaf and instant mashed potatoes, steam fogging up the windows against the early autumn cold. Dad sliced his portion with surgical precision, same as every night. Mason scrolled through his phone under the table, thumbs flying. Mom passed the gravy boat across without looking up. I cleared my throat twice before anyone noticed. "I got into Portland State," I said.
trying to keep my voice steady. Full scholarship for computer science. The silence that dropped over that table felt heavier than concrete. Mason looked up first, his eyebrows raised in what might have been surprise or might have been mockery. Dad kept chewing slowly, methodically. Mom set the gravy boat down hard enough that brown liquid sloshed over the rim onto her precious tablecloth. Portland, she repeated, her voice sharp and cold as winter ice. That's completely across the country, Jordan. It's actually only about 1,200 miles, Mom, I said quietly, pushing the acceptance letter across the table toward her. Not even close to across the country. The program starts in January. She didn't even touch the paper, didn't look at it. You're not going anywhere. Absolutely not. Mason has showcases coming up, college coaches flying in from everywhere. He needs you here to help run errands, keep his schedule organized, make sure everything runs smoothly. I felt heat rising in my cheeks, spreading down my neck. This is my future we're talking about, not his personal assistant position. Mom leaned forward, her eyes hard. Your future is helping this family succeed. When Mason gets drafted into the pros, we all benefit from that. You can stay right here, take some classes at community college if you're so desperate to learn. End of discussion. I stood up fast, my chair scraping loud and harsh against the tile floor. It's not your decision to make. I grabbed the letter off the table and headed straight for the stairs. Mom called after me, something about ingratitude and disrespect, but I didn't stop walking, didn't turn around. Up in my bedroom, I spread all the documents across my bed like treasure. Orientation dates, housing assignment forms, a campus map with the engineering building circled in bright red marker. I filled out everything online that very night, using the family desktop in the hallway while Mason was in the shower singing off-key. The acceptance portal blinked green. Confirmed. Submitted. Real. Have you ever had to fight for something that should have just been supported? Something that was clearly yours to have? Drop it in the comments. The next few weeks turned our house into a war zone, quiet and cold. Mom completely ignored the boxes I started packing and stacking in the hallway. She scheduled all of Mason's physical therapy appointments during my shifts at the grocery store, forcing me to desperately swap schedules with coworkers who barely knew me. Dad drove me to the DMV for a state ID update without saying a single word the entire drive, but when I asked him to co-sign the housing contract, he just shook his head slowly. "Ask your mother," he said, for the 1,000th time in my life. Aunt Rachel showed up completely unannounced one cold evening, pulling me aside in the garage where Mom couldn't hear. "I heard what's happening," she whispered, pressing a debit card firmly into my hand. $500 loaded on there, for your flight, for whatever else you need. Her eyes were absolutely steady, unwavering. "You're doing this, Jordan. You're getting out." I booked the plane ticket that same night, sitting in the dark glow of my laptop screen. Portland to Denver, one-way ticket, red-eye departure. I printed the boarding pass at the library the next afternoon, folded it as small as possible, and tucked it safely inside my calculus textbook where nobody would find it. The night before I left, Mom cornered me in the laundry room while I was sorting clothes. "You walk out that door tomorrow," she said, her voice low and threatening, "and you're completely on your own. No coming back for holidays, no phone calls asking for money when things get hard. Nothing." She folded Mason's jerseys with sharp, angry snaps of fabric. "Think very hard about what you're throwing away here, Jordan." I met her gaze directly, steadily. "I have thought about it. I've thought about nothing else." Departure morning dawned gray and freezing cold. I dragged my duffel bag and backpack to the curb at 4 in the morning, my breath fogging in the porch light that flickered like it might die any second. Nobody stirred inside the dark house, not a single light turned on. I'd called a rideshare using Rachel's card, $23 for the trip to the airport. The driver helped load my bags into the trunk while I stared at those dark windows one last time. Then headlights swept across the driveway. Aunt Rachel's Toyota rolled up slow, engine rumbling rough in the cold. She climbed out wearing her winter coat, hair pulled back in a messy bun, eyes tired but determined. "Couldn't let you go alone, sweetheart," she said, pulling me into the tightest hug. "Not a chance." We drove to the airport in complete silence, just the radio playing soft jazz in the background. She parked at departures, popped the trunk without a word.
Text me the second you land safely, okay? The very second. Check-in was surprisingly smooth. Scholarship students apparently got priority treatment. I waved back at Rachel through the security checkpoint glass, watching her stand there with one hand pressed to the barrier until I completely disappeared down the long concourse. The plane taxied out onto the runway just as the sun started rising pink and gold over the mountains. I pressed my forehead against the cold window, watching Denver shrink smaller and smaller below me until it was nothing but tiny lights scattered across the darkness. Mom texted exactly once during the entire flight. "Mason has a recruiting dinner tonight with scouts. Don't forget to call and wish him luck." I stared at those words for a long moment, then deleted the message completely. The seatbelt sign dinged off. I pulled out the campus map I'd printed and traced the route from the airport to my new dorm with my finger, memorizing every turn. 1,200 miles away. A completely new area code, my own key to my own room, my own life, finally. Aunt Rachel's last message buzzed through as the wheels touched down in Portland. "So incredibly proud of you. Now go build something amazing." I saved it, powered off my phone completely, and stepped out into the terminal. Portland smelled like rain and coffee and possibilities I'd never even imagined before. The rideshare to campus took almost an hour through morning traffic. I checked into the dormitory with a plastic key card that felt like pure gold in my hand. Room 312, empty except for 2 beds and a desk positioned right by the window overlooking the quad. I unpacked my laptop first, the same one I'd rebuilt a dozen times in that basement storage room, plugged it carefully into the wall, and watched that familiar boot screen glow to life. No more hiding in dark corners, no more apologizing for existing. This space, this room, this entire future was completely mine. Portland was freedom, but freedom came with a price I hadn't expected, a price that would test everything I'd worked for. Stay with me. This is where everything shifts. Portland arrived without snow that first winter. Just endless gray skies and this damp chill that soaked straight through my jacket during morning walks to class. The scholarship covered tuition completely, but it left almost nothing for food after I paid for my tiny dorm room. I picked up shifts at a diner 3 blocks off campus. Greasy countertops, endless coffee refills that smelled burnt by noon, tips left in crumpled dollar bills and loose change. The manager, a woman named Rita with tired eyes, scheduled me for double shifts every weekend. Plates clattered from 6 in the morning until midnight when we finally locked the doors. Nights belonged to the warehouse on the industrial edge of the city. I stocked shelves for a medical supply company, scanning endless barcodes under fluorescent lights that buzzed like angry wasps and gave me headaches that lasted for days. The pay was better, though, cash payments under the table for any overtime hours. I'd clock in at 10 at night, loading heavy boxes of syringes and bandages and surgical masks until the forklift horns finally faded around dawn. Sleep came in desperate snatches between classes, my head nodding forward over textbooks in quiet library cubicles while other students studied peacefully around me. One Thursday night shift ran dangerously late. A massive rush order came through for ventilators, hospitals all scrambling ahead of flu season hitting hard. The supervisor kept barking orders for faster stacking, faster loading. I was operating the electric pallet jack, carefully maneuvering heavy pallets down narrow aisles stacked impossibly high with wooden crates. My eyes burned from complete exhaustion and lack of sleep, but the clock showed triple overtime pay, money I desperately needed. I reversed too quickly around a sharp corner, the wheel catching hard on a loose cargo strap I hadn't seen. The entire jack tipped sideways, a tower of boxes shifting directly toward me in horrible slow motion. I jumped clear just in time, but my foot slipped on scattered packing peanuts covering the concrete floor. The pallet crashed down hard, its metal edge slamming straight into my ankle with a crack I felt through my entire body. Pain exploded up my leg like lightning, like fire. I hit the concrete floor hard, all the breath knocked completely out of my lungs. Alarms started blaring from the impact sensors installed throughout the warehouse. Workers started shouting from every direction, "Someone kill the main power!" Cameron appeared first, this tall guy from my algorithms class who'd been moonlighting the same brutal shift to pay his own rent. He'd seen the whole accident happen from the loading dock. "Don't move at all," he ordered firmly, dropping to his knees beside me. He yanked off his canvas belt and wrapped it tight above where my ankle was already swelling up purple. "Elevate this now." He propped my leg carefully on a flattened cardboard box, already dialing 911 on his ancient flip phone. The warehouse manager hovered nearby, muttering worried things about incident reports and liability. Paramedics arrived within maybe 5 minutes, Portland's emergency response impressively fast. They carefully splinted my ankle, their hands gentle but efficient, and loaded me onto a stretcher that felt surreal and terrifying. Cameron rode in the ambulance with me, holding my backpack tight on his lap. "You're not paying a cent for this," he said when I started protesting about medical bills I couldn't afford to pay. "Workers' comp covers every bit of it." At the emergency room, X-rays showed a clean fracture. No surgery needed, thank God, just a walking boot and crutches I had no idea how to use. The doctor prescribed rest I absolutely could not afford to take. Cameron drove me back to the dorm in his rusty Civic, hazard lights blinking the whole way through empty pre-dawn streets. "You need help with class notes," he stated flatly, not asking. "That's not optional." He started showing up after every shift he worked, laptop balanced carefully on his knees, sharing code snippets from lectures I'd missed assembly. We debugged programming assignments together late into the night, trading energy drinks for concentration and desperately needed focus. The warehouse fired me the very next week. Company policy after any injury, they said, no exceptions. The diner cut my hours too, claiming slow season, even though I knew that was complete garbage. Rent loomed over me like a dark cloud. I hobbled on crutches to the financial aid office, practically begging for emergency funds to cover basic living expenses. They offered me a loan with interest rates that made my stomach turn. Aunt Rachel wired $300 from her own thin savings without me even asking, with absolutely no questions attached. It bought groceries for 2 weeks and bus fare to get to my remaining classes. Ever felt like you were drowning and someone threw you a lifeline you didn't even know you needed? That's what Cameron and Rachel were for me. Cameron proposed an idea over cold pizza one night in the dorm lounge, grease staining the cardboard box between us. "We're both drowning in medical supply data from working that warehouse," he said, wiping tomato sauce from his chin with a wadded napkin. "Hospitals are constantly losing track of inventory during emergency surges. What if we built actual software to predict shortages before they happen?" He started sketching flowcharts on napkins, drawing boxes and arrows showing machine learning models that could be trained on historical shipment logs and usage patterns. I stared at those diagrams, my ankle throbbing dully inside the boot, but something in my brain just clicked into place. We had access to public datasets from the CDC, plus anonymized records I'd secretly copied onto a flash drive before getting fired from the warehouse. Marcus, a senior in bioinformatics with dark-rimmed glasses, joined our project after overhearing us arguing about algorithms in the computer lab one afternoon. He brought serious expertise in neural networks and this quiet, intense focus that perfectly balanced Cameron's chaotic energy. We coded deep into every night in the engineering building's basement, using old computers and fluorescent lights we'd basically salvaged from the university surplus sales. The prototype ran on my ancient rebuilt laptop, networked together with Cameron's desktop and Marcus's expensive gaming rig his parents had bought him for graduation. The system scraped through order histories, flagged critically low stock on essential items like PPE and medications. Our accuracy hit 85% on test data we ran. We were onto something real. Investor demos started small and terrifying. Pitches to skeptical professors, then to local health tech startups who barely took us seriously at first. We officially incorporated as MedPredict AI, filed all the paperwork for a patent on our core algorithm. A seed funding round came through from an angel investor who'd lost a family member to supply shortages during a disease outbreak. The check cleared for 6 figures. We could barely breathe. We rented a cramped office space above a vape shop that smelled like artificial strawberries, covered every single wall with whiteboards and post-it notes. Cameron handled all operations and logistics. Marcus endlessly refined the prediction models. I led all the development work, writing code until my eyes crossed. My crutches eventually gave way to a walking boot, then finally back to regular sneakers. The fracture healed crooked but strong enough to carry me forward. We launched our beta version with 3 brave hospital partners, giving them dashboards that alerted their procurement teams in real time when supplies were running low. Revenues started trickling in from monthly subscriptions. It felt like magic, like validation, like proof that everything I'd been through mattered. Mom called exactly once during this time, her number showing up on my phone screen like a ghost. Mason signed a minor league contract, she announced, her voice sounding strangely small and distant. You should call him and congratulate him, Jordan. I let it ring straight to voicemail, didn't listen to the message, just deleted it and moved on. Aunt Rachel texted me congratulations on the platform launch with a simple coffee cup emoji that made me smile for the first time in weeks. The software platform scaled faster than we'd ever imagined possible. We hired 2 bright-eyed interns fresh out of undergrad, upgraded all our servers to cloud infrastructure that didn't crash every other day. MedPredict AI became the essential backbone for regional health networks, predicting supply surges before they ever hit the evening news. My name appeared on the official cap table, equity shares that grew with every new contract we signed. Cameron high-fived me so hard after our first major renewal that my hand stung. From warehouse floor to this empire, he laughed, gesturing wildly at our chaotic office. Marcus just nodded silently, already typing furiously on the next critical update. The warehouse accident faded slowly to just a scar hidden under my sock, a permanent reminder that sometimes falling apart completely is exactly what points you toward where you're supposed to go. Then recognition came, real recognition, the kind that changes everything and brings ghosts from your past knocking at your door. This is where I had to make the hardest choice of my life. An email from Forbes landed in my inbox on a random Tuesday morning, the subject line practically screaming 30 under 30 tech innovators. I clicked it open from my office desk, coffee going cold beside my keyboard, barely believing what I was reading. We'd made the list. Actually, I made it. The feature article profiled MedPredict AI as the groundbreaking tool saving hospitals millions in wasted inventory and, more importantly, saving actual human lives. My photo, taken at a tech conference where I'd worn a blazer over jeans and felt completely out of place, sat right next to Cameron and Marcus, looking professional and successful and real. The writer called us the trio turning raw data into saved lives. The recognition absolutely exploded overnight. LinkedIn notifications pinged constantly until I had to turn them off. Investors slid into my DMs with offers. Conference speaking invitations stacked up faster than I could respond. We flew out to San Francisco for the actual award ceremony and rented formal wear from a boutique in the city that cost more than my first month's rent. Standing on that stage under blinding spotlights while the host read our entire biography out loud felt surreal and terrifying and amazing. I gripped the heavy glass trophy in both hands, thanked our small team, and kept my speech short and genuine. Camera flashes went off like fireworks. Someone in the crowd shouted questions about acquisition rumors. Back in Portland, our platform handled its first real major crisis. A hurricane slammed into the coast, knocking out entire power grids throughout the region. Our system automatically rerouted critical drug shipments from unaffected warehouses hundreds of miles away, preventing devastating shortages in overwhelmed ICUs. Hospital administrators sent us thank you emails that included actual patient stories that made me cry. Grandmothers receiving their chemotherapy treatments on schedule, children getting insulin deliveries without terrifying delays. This had a real impact, real lives. Revenue crossed 7 figures from enterprise licensing deals. A massive pharmaceutical company approached us 6 months after the Forbes recognition. Their VP flew in on an actual private jet, toured our cramped office space above the vape shop like he was visiting a museum. He ran complex valuation numbers on our whiteboard with an expensive marker. The acquisition offer came over fancy steaks at a rooftop restaurant with a view of the entire city. 8 figures for a complete buyout, stock options that made my head spin, retention bonuses to keep us on board. Cameron negotiated fiercely for days to protect our employee equity, making sure everyone who'd helped build this got their fair share. Marcus crunched valuation models on his laptop until 3 in the morning, checking every number twice. I signed the final term sheet at dawn with a pen that felt heavy as gold, my hand surprisingly steady. The deal officially closed in a downtown conference room, lawyers shuffling through papers thicker than textbooks, more pages than I'd ever seen in my life. Wire transfers hit all our bank accounts that same week. I paid off student loans I'd never actually taken out, paid off Aunt Rachel's mortgage completely, and wired her enough money for a brand new car without asking permission first. She replied with a photo of herself at the dealership, standing next to a shiny blue sedan, her caption reading, "No more rattling Toyota, thanks to you, superstar." I went house hunting on weekends, driving past identical suburban developments until I found Lake Oswego, bright water glinting under tall pine trees. The realtor, a woman in her 50s with kind eyes, showed me a modern house right on the water, floor-to-ceiling windows everywhere, a dock stretching out over calm water, a kitchen big enough to cook for an army. I walked through the empty great room, my footsteps echoing on beautiful hardwood floors, and pictured gatherings without scoreboards or competitions or conditional love. Closing took 30 days of paperwork. I moved in with a few boxes labeled in thick black Sharpie, my rebuilt laptop placed reverently on the kitchen counter like an old friend. The dining area needed a table, something special. I found a custom furniture maker who built me a solid oak table, 10 feet long and seats for 10 people. I spent an entire weekend sanding the surface myself, the sharp smell of wood stain filling the open air, my hands getting blisters I didn't care about. Cameron helped me carry in the matching benches, both of us sweating and laughing as we struggled to level the legs perfectly. "This is the real upgrade right here," he said, slapping the smooth wood with appreciation. Marcus arrived later with housewarming beer and a smart home hub that controlled every light and sound system through a phone app. We broke in the new table with takeout barbecue, sauce dripping on the fresh grain, laughter bouncing off the high vaulted ceilings. Tell me in the comments if you've ever had to choose between a family who hurt you and the family you built yourself. And if you've dealt with something similar, please share your story. You're not alone in this. Subscribe for more stories about standing your ground and reclaiming your life on your own terms. The acquisition team kept us all on as highly paid consultants. I flew to quarterly board meetings in New York, presented detailed forecasts in rooms full of executives, watched our platform integrate into national hospital networks that served millions. Press releases announced MedPredict now powering 80% of hospitals throughout the entire region. My equity kept vesting in substantial chunks, enough to fund ambitious side projects without ever begging venture capitalists for money again. Neighbors started trickling over for casual lake parties in the summer. Miguel, the single dad living next door, brought his daughter Sophia and a cooler packed with sodas. We grilled steaks on the dock while kids cannonballed into the warm water, their laughter echoing across the lake. Dr. Harrison, my old algorithms professor, drove down from campus for a long weekend retreat, absolutely marveling at the view from my deck. "You build so much more than just code, Jordan," he said quietly, raising his glass to toast. I started hosting free coding boot camps in my finished basement, a projector beaming tutorials onto the wall, while local teenagers learned Python fundamentals over pizza. Their eyes went wide, staring at the server rack humming efficiently in the corner. One brilliant kid found and fixed a bug in our open source repository. His pull request got merged into production code. I printed out that commit message and framed it, hanging it proudly above the fireplace. The table saw its very first Thanksgiving without any family drama or tension. Cameron carved the turkey while cracking terrible jokes. Marcus mixed dangerously strong cocktails with way too much lime juice. Sophia carefully set every place with napkins she'd folded into perfect swans from a YouTube tutorial. We ate until we were absolutely stuffed, dishes piling high in the sink, the lake lapping peacefully outside the windows. Nobody checked sports scores, nobody mentioned scouting reports or recruiting rankings, just us, chosen family, exactly where we belonged. What does chosen family mean to you? The people who show up, who stay, who choose you back every single time? Let me know. 6 years after I'd walked out of that birthday party in Denver, a heavy invitation arrived in my mail. Expensive cardstock with gold foil lettering that caught the light. Mom's 60th birthday party. The envelope showed my old Kansas City address crossed out in red pen, my new Portland address printed on a crisp label below it. I turned that invitation over multiple times in my hands, my thumb tracing the embossed edges. Curiosity won. I booked a nonstop flight, packed light in a small carry-on, and landed on a Friday evening as the sun set orange over the mountains. The rental car smelled artificial, like pine air freshener trying too hard. I drove those familiar routes I'd known my whole childhood, past the high school fields where Mason used to practice for hours, past the diner where I had wiped down tables for tips. The red brick house looked smaller now, shrunken somehow, paint peeling badly at the corners, the driveway cracked even deeper than I remembered. Balloons bobbed cheerfully from the mailbox, music thumped from somewhere in the backyard. I parked down the street, walked up slowly in jeans and a nice blazer. Guests filled the patio, neighbors I vaguely recognized, old coaches with beer bellies, distant relatives whose names I'd forgotten years ago. Dad spotted me first, standing near the grill with a spatula gripped in one hand. "Jordan?" he said, his voice completely flat and emotionless. He hugged me quick and awkward, smelling exactly like charcoal smoke and cheap cologne. Mom appeared in the doorway wearing an apron over her party dress, her eyes narrowing immediately when she saw me. "You actually came," she said slowly, like an accusation, wiping her hands roughly on a kitchen towel. No smile, no warmth. Mason lumbered over, his beer gut straining against a shirt 2 sizes too small. "Hey, sis," he slurred slightly, his handshake limp and damp. "Heard you're some big tech mogul now, or whatever." He clapped my shoulder way too hard, the way drunk people do. The party swirled on around me, cake-cutting ceremonies, long speeches about Mom's community service and church volunteer work. I stood at the edge of everything, sipping water from a plastic cup, feeling like a ghost at my own past. Mom raised her glass high from those same patio steps, giving another toast. "To family," she announced loudly, her gaze locking directly onto me like a laser. "Some children you wish you never had to see at all, but blood keeps dragging them back, doesn't it?" Laughter erupted from the crowd, people clapping and cheering. Travis snorted into his beer can. Dad just stared down at the grass, silent as always. Those words hit me even harder than the first time, sharper somehow, crueler. I set my cup down on the nearest table and walked straight towards her, my heart pounding. "Your wish actually came true years ago, Mom," I said clearly, my voice carrying. "I live in Portland permanently now. I built an entire life you know nothing about." Mom's face flushed deep red. "Don't you dare make a scene at my party, Jordan." "No scene," I replied calmly, steadily, "just stating facts you should probably accept." I turned and walked away, threading through the silent crowd. Someone whispered something I didn't catch. Mason called after me, something about disrespect and gratitude. I kept walking, keys already in my hand, my steps sure and strong. The drive back to the airport blurred past, highway lights streaking by, radio turned completely off. I boarded a red-eye flight, clicked my seatbelt as the wheels lifted off the runway. My phone buzzed as we climbed higher, Mom's number flashing. A text, "Call me immediately, we need to talk about your attitude." I blocked the number mid-flight, 30,000 feet in the air, the screen going permanently dark. Back in Portland by sunrise, I went straight home and deleted her contact information completely, cleared every text thread. No more notifications from that area code ever again. The villa waited for me, silent and peaceful, the lake shimmering outside in the early light. I brewed strong coffee, sat on the dock, and watched the sun climb slowly over the mountains. 6 years of complete silence confirmed this was right. Dad sent one email later, forwarded from an ancient account I'd forgotten existed. "Your mother is upset. Travis lost his sponsorship deal and needs help." I moved it to archives without even reading it fully. Aunt Rachel texted me a simple thumbs-up emoji. Nothing else needed to be said between us. The party faded like a bad dream I'd finally woken up from. Work resumed Monday morning. Conference calls, product roadmaps, strategy meetings. Colleagues asked politely about my weekend trip. I just shrugged. Family obligation. It's done now. No additional details needed. The old fracture from the warehouse accident still ached sometimes in cold weather, a dull reminder, but this choice, this final cut from my past, felt cleaner, healthier, right. I changed my emergency contact information to Cameron, updated all my beneficiary forms to include Aunt Rachel and my chosen family. The lawyer processing everything asked 0 questions, professional and efficient. The past stayed locked in Denver, buried under balloon strings and cake crumbs I'd never think about again. One evening, weeks later, Miguel grilled fresh fish next door. He waved me over enthusiastically. "You doing okay, Jordan?" he asked, flipping fillets carefully. I nodded, accepting a plate. "Yeah, actually, I really am." We ate on his patio while Sophia and her friends chased fireflies through the warm evening air, their laughter floating across the lake. The blocked number tried reaching out from a different phone line months later. Mason's voicemail, slurred and desperate, begging for money to pay lawyer fees for some trouble he'd gotten into. I deleted it without listening to the whole thing, emptied the trash folder, made it permanent. Mom's birthday photos eventually surfaced on a distant cousin's social media. Big smiles, no mention whatsoever of my walking out. I scrolled past quickly, unfollowed that entire feed. Distance wasn't measured in miles anymore. It was measured in blocked numbers and deleted contacts and boundaries I'd finally learned to set. I flew business class to tech conferences now, spoke on expert panels about AI ethics and healthcare innovation. When reporters asked about my origin story, I mentioned the scholarship that saved me, skipped everything else. The narrative stayed mine to shape however I wanted. Aunt Rachel visited once, driving the scenic loop around the lake in her new car, her smile wider than I'd ever seen her. "Proud doesn't even begin to cover what I feel, Jordan," she said over dinner at my table. We toasted with sparkling water, the bubbles catching the sunset light. She left with containers of leftovers and gave me the longest hug. No backward glances, just forward momentum. The birthday invitation went into a drawer first, then through the shredder, becoming paper confetti I scattered in my garden beds, mulch for new growth. Denver became just a dot on weather apps I checked before booking flights to other places. Nothing more than that. Portland's rain wrapped around me like comfort now. Mornings smelled like coffee and possibility. I ran the path along the water at sunrise, earbuds playing my favorite music, my stride strong and even. 1 full year passed. No cards from Denver, no phone calls, silence that felt like actual gold. I hosted a team retreat at my house, strategy sessions happening around that oak table, whiteboards set up on easels, Marcus sketching out roadmaps for the next 5 years, Cameron ordering enough catering to feed 20 people. Productive and peaceful and perfect. The words, "you'll never amount to anything," echoed only in distant memory now, completely overwritten with new code, new commits to my life's repository, clean builds, successful deployments. I opened the doors wide that Christmas, strung lights twinkling along the dock, fresh pine scent drifting from the tree in the great room, simple cards sent weeks earlier with just the address and a lake photo. Guests arrived with covered dishes and wrapped presents, tires crunching on my gravel driveway. Aunt Rachel pulled in first, her trunk loaded with boxes from her favorite bakery, the smell of cinnamon and sugar filling the cold air. She hugged me on the threshold, her coat dusted with light snow from the mountains. Marcus followed in his quiet electric car, carrying craft beer in a wooden crate. Miguel and Sophia bounded up the steps, arms overflowing with homemade tamales mapped in corn husks. Dr. Harrison arrived last, his scarf knotted perfectly, carrying a decorative tin of spiced nuts. We gathered around the oak table, every single seat filled exactly as I'd imagined it would be. Candles flickered in elegant glass holders, plates piled dangerously high with turkey, stuffing, and Rachel's famous pecan pie that I'd dreamed about. Laughter rose over the sound of silverware clinking. Sophia passed the gravy boat carefully. Marcus poured refills for everyone. Dr. Harrison shared stories about his research breakthroughs, his eyes bright with excitement. No agenda existed here, no scorekeeping, no conditions, just people who'd chosen to show up for each other again and again. My phone buzzed once during the meal. Unknown number, Kansas City area code trying one more time. I silenced it without even looking, slipped it into my pocket, and went right back to the conversation happening around me. Miguel was teaching Sophia a new card trick, his hands moving quick and sure. Later, after dessert, when the table was covered in crumbs and empty plates, I stood up with my glass raised. "One more thing I want to share," I said, my voice carrying clear. I explained the Jordan Rivers Foundation, seed money coming from my acquisition earnings, full ride scholarships specifically for low-income STEM students facing family resistance or obstacles, applications opening in January, complete mentorship built directly into the program. Dr. Harrison immediately offered to chair the advisory board, his voice firm with commitment. Rachel wiped away a tear, nodding so hard her whole body moved. We toasted the foundation, glasses chiming together like bells. Sophia asked shyly if she could apply when she got older. "Absolutely," I told her, my smile genuine. "That's exactly who this is for." The table erupted with excited planning, fundraising ideas, coding camp proposals, alumni networking possibilities. Energy buzzed through the room like the early startup days, everyone talking over each other with enthusiasm. Later, we all bundled up in coats and scarves for the dock. I'd hire a small fireworks company for a modest show, nothing extravagant. Bursts of color reflected perfectly on the dark water. Kids shouted with delight. Adults pulled out phones to capture the moment. Dr. Harrison stood beside me, his hands in his pockets. "This right here, Jordan, this is real legacy," he said quietly, his breath fogging in the cold air. I smiled, watching red and gold explode overhead, the colors painting everyone's faces. "Yeah, I think it really is." Cleanup afterward became a group effort, Marcus loading the dishwasher with mechanical precision, Miguel wrapping leftovers in foil, Rachel labeling containers with a permanent marker. The tree lights glowed soft and warm as the last guest finally headed home, car doors closing gently in the quiet night. I locked the front door, stood completely alone in the peaceful silence, table cleared, chairs pushed back in, the lake lapping rhythmically outside. The foundation launched publicly that spring, with a press release that hit regional news outlets. Applications flooded in from across the country. The very first recipient was a girl from rural Idaho whose parents wanted her married young instead of educated. She'd taught herself to code in secret, just like I had. I met her at orientation, handed her the scholarship check personally, watched tears stream down her face as she whispered thank you over and over. Mom made one final attempt, a handwritten letter forwarded from my old address, begging for money to cover Mason's rehabilitation costs after some unspecified trouble. I wrote "Return to sender" across the envelope in bold letters and dropped it in the mailbox. No reply needed or wanted. Aunt Rachel moved even closer, bought a condo just 10 minutes away. Sunday dinners became our standing tradition. Her recipes, my grill, always more food than two people needed. Marcus and Miguel joined often, Cameron video calling in from wherever his latest adventure took him. Kids growing up fast, asking smart questions, dreaming big dreams. Dr. Harrison retired from teaching, but consulted for the foundation pro bono, reviewing every application with careful attention. We met monthly over coffee, discussing which students needed us most. The table hosted milestone after milestone, grant award ceremonies, quiet Tuesday evenings with Chinese takeout, birthday celebrations where candles got blown out and wishes got made. Every seat filled with people who'd earned their place through loyalty and love, not blood relation or obligation. Years stacked up quietly. The foundation funded dozens of students. Graduates sent updates regularly, patents filed, companies launched, families built on their own terms, just like I'd done. I framed their success stories, hanging them throughout my house like artwork. One peaceful Christmas Eve, I sat alone at that oak table, coffee steaming in my favorite mug, phone completely silent, every notification turned off. The lake had frozen at the edges, ice glinting under moonlight. Family wasn't about biology or shared last names. It was about the table you built with intention, the doors you opened with purpose, the hands you held without conditions attached. I'd built all of this, every bit of it, cut completely free from roots that only choked me, planted myself in soil that actually wanted me to grow. The lesson had crystallized over years into something I knew bone deep and certain.
Real family is the table you build yourself, the people you choose who choose you right back, the love you give freely because you want to, not because you have to. Portland forever, chosen family forever. No regrets, not a single one. And honestly, I'd do it all exactly the same way again.